You'll remember in 2017, the presidency released the report of the Commission of Inquiry probing the feasibility of free higher education and training in South Africa. Among the Commission's recommendations are all graduates, undergraduates and postgraduate students studying at both public and private universities and colleges, regardless of their family background, be funded through a cost-sharing model of government-guaranteed income contingency loans sourced from commercial banks. Also recommended replacing the existing NSFAS model with a new income contingency loan system. Years later, students are still protesting. So I want to discuss this further and bring in Professor Ahmed Bawa, the CEO of Universities of South Africa, and also we're going to have very shortly analyst Kaya Sitole. He'll join us soon. Kaya, in fact, helped some Wits students a couple of years ago to draw up a model with regards to the feasibility of making higher education and training free in this country. But Professor Bawa, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me again.
It has been, almost 6 years now since the Fees Must Fall campaign. Students' dissatisfaction with the cost of education and access to funding were in the spotlight. The government responded by announcing this 0% change in fees for the 2016 academic year. Also a expanded bursary scheme to support students from poorer backgrounds was implemented. But Prof, what difference has those initiatives made 5 years, 6 years down the line?
Yeah. So, Blaine, I think that's a very good question to ask. I mean, so just to start with, I think that we have to accept that the bursary program that was put in place in 2017 had a huge impact on a certain category of students. So those students who come from what was referred to as poor and working class families. And for those students, it worked very well. Of course, at that time, we did have concerns, and we raised concerns about the sustainability of the model. And of course, this year, we know that there's a major shortfall of 5.6 billion rand. But of course, we were completely clear that that was not a solution for that group of students that we refer to as being in the missing middle. And the crisis that we are seeing now, again, at University of KwaZulu-Natal, at Wits and various other places, is precisely about that group of students,
right,
for whom there is no solution. And your earlier point about there being options that we should have pursued as a nation just didn't take hold. We just didn't kind of really get our act together.
What is the state of play? What do we know about the amount of revenue that South Africa is, 20-odd universities and about 6 universities of technology receive from government in the form of grants versus the amount generated or received from non-grant sources such as tuition fees, donations, interests and dividends, etc., etc. What do we know about that balance?
Sure. No, so it depends very much on the institution that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So if you compare, so for example, if you're talking about the University of Cape Town, I don't know the exact figure, but I suspect that it's in the region of the subsidies in the region of about 20%. And then the rest of the money that comes in is via research grants, investment income, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, if you go to the Universities of Technology or the historically disadvantaged institutions, which do not have very substantial reserves and so on, what you see there is that the dependence on the subsidy is much higher. It's more like 50%, say. So it does depend on the institution that you're talking about.
Right. It's important for the viewers to get a sense of what we're talking about here, especially when you hear students putting forward various models in terms of funding of universities. NSFAS is facing a shortfall on its funding for 2021. We know that, which means that it has been unable to confirm funding for new university students. Correct. The reasons we were given for the shortfall were of course, COVID-19, then it was budget cuts across government department, another reason, and also because of the deteriorating economic situation. Now, we heard the minister, Nzimande, saying that, of course, not all these shortfalls are due to COVID-19 alone. The deteriorating situation associated with the budget cuts started a long time ago before COVID-19. But the minister did mention that NSFAS is going to be funding all returning NSFAS beneficiary students who meet the academic and other relevant criteria for continuing their studies. But having considered all of that, Prof, what's the long-term solution here with regards to this issue? What's the options on the table for the minister?
Yeah, no, I think you pose exactly the right question, because if we don't answer this question, we'll be back here saying exactly the same thing next year. So you pose exactly the right question, and I think that there are options on the table. I mean, and the Hare Commission, by the way, did put forward certain suggestions that government just didn't act on. So let me make 2 points. I mean, the one is that the idea that you raised earlier, the idea of the income contingent loan system, which works on the basis that students receive a loan, a low interest loan, and then pay that back once they start earning. That's something which has worked in other countries.
Yeah.
It's not completely fail-proof, in fact, but it has worked in other countries. And what it will require is a very significant partnership between university and the private sector to come together. We've spoken to the Banking Association of South Africa on 1 or 2 occasions, and they've indicated a willingness to have this engagement. But we haven't had kind of an interest from government to do that. I mean, in the meeting that we had with the minister this week, he pointed out that this was something that he was going to pursue now. So hopefully that will be the issue. That will take place. But let me just make this point that right now we have a challenge. The challenge is that first-time entry students who qualify for the bursary, the government bursary, must be funded. We can't not have that. So we really are anxious to hear what will be said in the press briefing today. But secondly, we have to try and understand how to get over this current impasse that we've got, and that will have to be, unfortunately, it'll have to be, it'll have to be some sort of negotiated approach that emerges here. I want to just emphasize, that the universities are not being, unkind or not generous. The fact of the matter is that the universities are facing a massive crisis. I mean, we've had subsidy cuts, we've had declines in research funding because of the cuts to the Department of Science and Innovation and so on. And now, of course, we hear that there are problems with NSFAS. So there are multiple kind of impacts on the funding of universities. And by the way, now fees are regulated. Yeah. So the increase in fees is regulated. So it's not for lack of wanting to act that the universities are not acting. It's about survival, basically.
Yeah. Prof, I know you pressed for time, but we thank you very much indeed for giving us your time this morning. Be well.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, Professor Ahmed Bawa, the CEO of Universities South Africa. We will still try to get to analyze